Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the sleeper OP or underrated picks for patch 7.12. So this patch, there are actually quite a few champions that did get some pretty good changes that are making them a lot stronger right now in 7.12. However, they are still fairly low pick. They're not very highly picked champions so far in this patch. So those are the champions we're going to be taking a look at in this video. So that being said, guys, let's get started. So the first champion here is going to be from the jungle, and it's going to be Reksai. So Reksai did get a few buffs in this patch. Her E got buffed. She also got a bit of a bug fix with her ultimate to where it's now going to land more consistently. In the previous patch, when she did get her rework, her ultimate was very rarely hitting champions because you could just flash away from it, you could dash away from it, you could even walk away from it in certain situations. So with them changing this and with you being able to hit it more often now as Reksai, I think she's a much stronger pick now in this patch, and it's definitely showing so far. She's always been one of the best early game junglers, but her numbers over time just kind of got gutted. She was one of the strongest junglers, fell to one of the weakest junglers, and in this patch right now, I actually think she's in a pretty good spot. She's not super OP or anything like she was a season ago, and she's also not super weak like she was a little while back. So I think that if you're looking for a solid jungler right now in this patch, then Reksai is a very good choice. And then as for your build, your runes and your masteries on Reksai, I'll put them up on screen here. The only thing I really want to touch on is that you shouldn't really be building this champion too tanky for solo queue. I think the best way to build Reksai is to go damage, so go warrior instead of Cinder Hulk, and then build like a Black Cleaver, a Titanic Hydra. That is what's doing very well on her in this patch right now. And then later on into the game, you can buy a Guardian Angel as well. That item's also super good on her because you want to be diving in on the back line as Reksai, and once you have that GA, then you don't really have to care too much if you end up getting caught out, especially if you are super far ahead. So next up here is going to be another jungler, and it's going to be Sejuani. Now in this patch right now, there's a specific build that a lot of people are using on Sejuani, especially in the Korean scene, being where they go for a Warmogs as their second item. So they obviously rush Cinder Hulk, but right after that they go Warmogs, and it's actually performing very well on her in this patch. I think a few reasons to why players are actually starting to build Warmogs more now on these tankier champions is because, number one, a lot of the other tank items, they got a health decrease on them a few patches ago, whereas Warmogs, it still gives you 800 health, which is by far the most for any tank item. I'm pretty sure other tank items now, they only have around like 300 or 400 health max, so getting a Warmogs just gets you super tanky health wise once you do reach the early to mid game. And then another reason to why I think you can go it on Sejuani as opposed to other champions is because you do have your passive on Sejuani, which does give you a little bit of bonus armor and magic resist for a little bit during a team fight, and therefore you don't really need to buy a armor and magic resist item super early on into the game. And then another reason to why this item is great on her is because once you do get a little bit later on into the game, you should be picking up a locket as well as a stone plate, and the locket interaction that you're gonna have with the Warmogs is gonna be extremely good, because if you guys don't know, the more HP you build now, the stronger your shield is going to be from the locket. And if you also end up getting the Gargoyle stone plate, then your locket shields in team fights are going to be insanely huge, and it's just going to allow you to keep your carries very safe in team fights. So next up here is going to be a mid laner, and it's going to be one of my most played champions this season, being Corki. So Corki did get some buffs this patch. He got some minor buffs to his base AD and his attack speed, I'm pretty sure. And then he also got a change to where he now does 80% of his damage as magic damage from his auto attack. So if you do end up going Magic Pen now on Corki as like your third or fourth item, if you pick up like a Void Staff in there, then your auto attacks are actually going to hurt for quite a bit right now in this patch. When you think of Magic Pen, you usually only think of it like enhancing your abilities, because that's what most champions buy it for, to make their abilities hurt more against these champions stacking MR. But with Corki, your auto attacks are doing that magic damage, and therefore if you get a little bit of attack speed on Corki, you grab that Magic Pen, then your auto attacks are going to be hurting for a lot, especially since you do go for the Sork Boots as well, and you can get a lot of magic pen later on into the game as this champion. I think that the buffs in this patch, they didn't make him super OP like he was before, but I do think he's a lot more viable right now in the mid lane for this patch, and he's definitely still a pretty good pick right now against these assassin picks because he runs exhaust, and if he's up against an AP type champion in the early game, he can rush a Maw and can do very well in those matchups still. So I think Corki's just a solid mid lane pick in this patch, not super OP, but not super weak like he was before. Now, as for Corki's build in this patch right now, I've kind of been watching this throughout the whole patch, and what's doing the best on him right now is actually going for a static shiv third item instead of the normal rapid fire cannon. A lot of people would usually go Triforce, IE, and then a rapid fire cannon after that, but a static shiv third item actually has like a 5% better win rate right now on Corki in this patch, so it's definitely a pretty interesting build, and it does allow for a little bit more burst damage, I guess, with your auto attacks. And then another thing to keep in mind is that you should be picking up Void Staff now on Corki later on into the game, or even in the mid game if the enemy team is stacking magic resist. It's a lot more useful now on Corki, I guess, because your auto attacks do 80% magic now, so by building that Void Staff, it's just going to allow your autos to do quite a bit more damage in team fights, and you should definitely be looking to pick that up at some point in your build. And then an AD carry pick that seems to actually be in a pretty good spot right now in this patch is Jhin. So Jhin did get some buffs like a lot of these champions did in this video. He got a buff to his Q as well as to his ultimate, and with those changes as well as like the crit item changes recently, it does definitely help Jhin out a lot. I think right now the best way to play him is to go for a crit build. Lethality doesn't seem very strong on him anymore, at least compared to that crit. You run the Warlords right now on Jhin, you go full crit on him, and you actually do a ton of damage with this champion. Now, what a sample build would look like on Jhin right now in this patch is you'd go Infinity Edge, Static Shiv, and then Rapid Fire Cannon. That is pretty core right now on him in 7.12. Now, the reason to why this build works pretty well on Jhin is because, number one, you are going to be getting those energized attacks a lot faster because of the interaction between Static Shiv and Rapid Fire Cannon, and then number two, if you get a 4-shot crit off onto the opponent and it's also an energized attack, that's going to deal a ton of damage, and it's just going to allow you to be a really good threat in those mid-game team fights. So overall, Jhin is back to being a pretty viable pick right now. The only matchups he's struggling a little bit against are Twitch and Draven, but those are two ADs that are pretty much beating every other AD in the game right now. So because he's only losing to those two really, and he's going even against most of the other ADs right now, he's definitely back to being a pretty solid pick for 7.12. And then to round out the video, the final pick here is going to be from the top lane, and it's going to be Heimerdinger. Now, Heimer top lane is a pick that I've kind of been watching the past few patches now. He's a pick that has done pretty well over these past few patches. In this patch right now, though, he is performing super good against Fiora and Darius, two of the most picked top laners in patch 7.12. He actually has, I'll put the stats up on screen here, but he's got a 57% win rate against Fiora in this patch, and Fiora really doesn't have too many bad matchups other than like Pantheon, obviously. So another good counter to Fiora in this patch, and another good pick that you can play against Darius and some of these other melee top laners is definitely good to have in your champion pool. And I think that Heimer would be a good addition if you're looking for a good lane bully ranged top lane champion. And then for your build on Heimerdinger right now, don't go with that like ZZ Rot banner build that was kind of popular a little while back. The best build right now on Heimer is building him damage. So going a Morello, after that building either Liandry's or Rylai's, and then like interchanging those two items. So if you get Liandry's first, then get Rylai's after. If you get Rylai's first, then you can get Liandry's after that. Usually like the rule of thumb I use to whether or not I pick up Rylai's or Liandry's first is if they do have a lot of melee champions that you can kite really well and they don't have a lot of gap closers, then Rylai's is really good in that situation because it just makes it super hard for those champions to get onto your back line. But if the enemy team does have a lot of gap closers in their kit and the Rylai's isn't really going to be as effective, then I'd go Liandry's as your second item. And then another interesting thing to note here is that W max on Heimerdinger actually does have the better win percent over the Q max. Most people do go for Q max still though 2 on Heimerdinger, so I'm not too sure if this is just like the Heimer 1 tricks that are playing him that are maxing W and they have a little bit of a better win rate, but that is what is performing best on him right now in patch. W max first, Q max second, and then E max last. I think the main reason to why people would go W max first is because it did get buffed a few patches ago. It got some pretty big buffs actually, to where the cooldown is pretty low now once you do get it maxed out, and it does do quite a bit more damage, I'm pretty sure, once you get it maxed out too. So you do have a lot more consistent damage, I guess, in team fights or in the mid game if you do go for a W max, whereas like your Q damage, it's not as consistent and it's not as reliable as your W damage is. So that is going to be it for this video, guys. Those are the champions that are performing pretty well in this patch right now, but do have a pretty low play rate compared to a lot of the other champions being played right now in this patch. So with that being said, guys, thanks for watching. If you did enjoy, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you have yet to already, and I will see you in my next video.